I stand before you and my respected colleagues to lead the debate on this bill, which seeks to amend the Central Bank of Nigeria Act to increase the total CBN advances to federal government. The bill was read for the first time in this chamber on today. The very essence of this bill, dear colleagues, is to enable the federal government meet its immediate and future obligation due to the government's increasing needs for funds to finance the budget deficits and other expenses. The Central Bank of Nigeria's advances to the federal government are essentially loans that the Central Bank of Nigeria provides to the government to help it meet its financial obligations. These advances are typically short-term and are expected to be repaid by the government. Mr. President, my respected colleagues, the passage and enactment of this amendment into law will, 1, provide immediate funds to address budget shortfalls and finance essential government expenditure. 2, will help maintain financial market stability by preventing government default on its obligation. Thirdly, Mr. President and respected colleagues, to inject money into the economy, thereby stimulating economic activity and potentially creating jobs. Number 4, to enable the government to support critical sectors like agriculture, health, and infrastructural development. And finally, Mr. President and colleagues, to lower the government borrowing costs by providing cheaper funds than the traditional borrowing method. This amendment is very consequential and it needs the support of all of us. This is to enable the federal government to embark on very important projects that will inflate and rejig the economy, especially the Renewal Hope infrastructural development across the country. And Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, may I also add that for the first time in a very long time in our political history, this is the first time that both the executive arm, under His Excellency Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, as well as the legislative arm of this, being this parliament, are passing, just as we just did, a budget that can undoubtedly be said to have the capital component being more than the recurrent component of the budget. And Mr. President, this is very significant for us and for our economy. I therefore urge you all to support the passage of this bill. I thank you all.
Bill, as ably moved by the Senate leader, and I think that what the bill is trying to do is actually just like it detailed out, is to actually provide a backup facility for the finances of the federal government. Now, I must just give a quick background as to how the economy has somehow performed so far this year, based on the review that the Committee on Finance has had with the executive, particularly just last month. Now, at the session, part of what came to light is that in terms of revenue performance, I think that we were made to know that the revenues of the federal government is actually is actually improving. The performance of the, gauging it from the FIRS angle, their performance this year has almost surpassed the total revenue collections for last year. That is one. Equally, the Customs Department too has also reported that they have done, by the half year this year, they have done over 127% of total revenue collections. Why are all of these indices important? They are important to show that the ability of government to continue to fund its operations is actually not in doubt. Just like just like most businesses, even when your revenue streams are very much in tandem with the way you are planned out in the year, there is what is called timing differences, and which is during that, timing differences means the timing for your revenue receipts and, of course, when you incur expenditure. And that is why most businesses will ride on the back of a facility that can be a stopgap. And I think that what this bill is trying to do is actually to create that stopgap. So, and the comfort is that the stopgap that we are looking at now is in the form of the advances that this bill is trying to amend and possibly increase. So, but the comfort is that the ability to repay it as it is stated in the CBN Act before the end of the financial year. And if we look at the revenue streams of government, I think that ability is not in doubt. So for me, I would say that I support this bill as proposed. And I believe that in supporting it, the intention of government will continue to be in tandem with the provisions of Section 38, which is that for all of the advances of this short-term nature, they are also repaid within the financial year. Now, having said all of this, I also think that I should also say that because of the current level of our deficit in the country, I also think that we should moderate even the approach of this increase that we are talking about. It is important that we moderate, because currently what we have is at 5%, and what I am seeing here is about 15%. So I would rather we moderate it to 10% for all the right reasons of fiscal discipline, and also to be very much in line with what international best practices are. So overall, I support this bill as proposed. I believe that the current operations of the government in terms of revenue accretion has also shown capacity to meet the clear dictates of this provision. I so support Mr. President and my distinguished colleagues. Thank you very much.
Hussein, representing Jigawa Northwest. Distinguished colleagues, I think first of all, I like to speak to the effort of this administration in terms of ramping up revenue generation. It's quite commendable, and at the same time, the capital component exceeding the recurrent component of the budget is also worth commending. But however, I want to propose that I like to align myself with Senator Abiru about limiting the scope of the borrowing to 10%, not 15%. Secondly, also, bullet point number 4, I would have suggested that we recouch it to read, borrowed funds shall be committed to critical sectors, because the language is flexible, it can be manipulated. I so submit, Mr. President. Thank you, sir.
Aliyu Sarkin Yakin Kefi, I represent Nasarawa West Senatorial District. Let me align myself to the presenter and those that have spoken before me. Government is a business, and business comes under both credit and debit. What becomes a problem on the side of debit is the inability to redeem the indebtedness. Now, from the records, it is not in doubt that the government will be able to redeem its indebtedness. I don't want to repeat what my colleagues have spoken about the current, recurrent, and of course, the level of revenue generation in the economy. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, having said what I have said, I have a different thinking going forward, not on this particular. To reduce the financial engagements or commitments of government in developing our infrastructure, we must not necessarily be subjecting the economy or the system to only ways and means. The capital market is there as a vehicle for government to issue bond for infrastructural development, which will enable the citizenry save by investing. It is also a borrowing, but a much cheaper borrowing that has a positive angle. By doing that, when you patronize your capital market, you are deepening and growing the capacity of your capital market. And the capital market all over the world is known as a veritable instrument for economic growth and development. So having supported and commended all that I have said, I am introducing a window going forward for tomorrow. We are supposed to be futuristic. As it's not emotion. Listen, stop distracting me. If you can't talk, I will always talk. Mr. President, you are uncommon, and we have all agreed to be uncommon senators. And what will make us really uncommon is to always look for different ways. We can't continue to be trailing on one path. When we exhaust it, we may not have where to go. But meanwhile, there are also, existing windows. The Nigerian capital market is robust enough, and especially with the recapitalization exercise coming up, with or for the banks, that will further deepen and grow the Nigerian capital market. So why not going forward tomorrow, instead of limiting ourselves to ways and means, we can as well leverage on the capital market. I so present, Mr. President, and distinguished.
Citizen is Ibrahim Dankwambo, representing Gombe North. Let me also rise to support the amendment, but in supporting, I will want to make this comment. Number one, that just now we have discussed that the minimum wage is going to be increased, and that is recurrent. Government services are going to be improved. These are recurrent. How capital can be more than recurrent, I don't know. But when we see the numbers, we will talk about those numbers. Two, government revenues are accruable in advance. Therefore, it is very important to have some level of borrowing from the central bank. But what matters is that when we borrow, we repay. When we borrow, we repay. And we should put a timing for the repayment. And I support that it will be too uncommon to increase the level of borrowing from 5% to 15%. That will be too wide for government to be very realistic. I support that we increase from 5 to 10% from some of the numbers that I have worked on, which I have. I therefore support that we increase the level of ways and means from 5 to 10%. And I support that this amendment should be done. Thank you, Mr. President.
Commending this proposed amendment, I think it deserves the support of the Senate, and I should be pegged to 10%. It's not about being generous to the federal government. It's about recognizing the fact that all over the world there are international best practices. If you were to increase the level to 15%, Nigeria would be on its way to that joke between Uganda President Idi Amin and the CBN governor, when he says, Idi Amin said, go and print more money, and he said, Uganda money will be turned to toilet paper. So we must understand that in macroeconomic issues, there are specific macroeconomic indicators that must be taken into account in imposing a limit. And therefore, the 10% for me is realistic, is doable, is a 100% improvement over the existing law. And the good thing that I think the president has done, and which under your leadership we are trying to work up proactively, is that unlike the past, when ways and means were done without the backing of the law, outside the framework of the law, we are ensuring that we update the law in a manner that government can act lawfully. Now, the idea of restricting the direction to which government can borrow is to avoid wastages. But it is safer to borrow on behalf of our children if it will be used to build a rail line, if it will be used to build basic infrastructure, so that education, highways, etc., etc. But if you borrow to pay salary, it's like a father borrowing to feed. And after 2 days toilet, it's over. But if a father borrows to build a house and he dies, the children can inherit the debt as well as the house that have been inherited. So, Mr. President, you know I don't like to make long speeches, and I thank you for your patience. I support this bill as argued eloquently by Abiru, who himself is not just a seasoned backer. He is well knowledgeable in basic macroeconomic issues. I think I have no hesitation in supporting the 10% and nothing more, and also restricting it to capital projects only.
Let me lend my voice also to commend the idea and the ideology behind this amendment the central bank is sorting for. Mr. President, this is the first time that the president is coming out clean as far as ways and means is concerned. I can vividly recollect during the night Senate when a bill was introduced regarding this particular ways and means. It was a lot of confusion as to how do we come about these figures. A lot of explanation, a lot of back and forth that dovetail to this new administration. We want to commend this administration who have exited us from the ways and means we incurred during the last administration. Now coming by way of bill, introducing to us an amendment being sought that there is need for us to increase the headroom from 5 to 10%. It is a right step in the right direction to 15%. But I agree with my colleague who have sought that it should not be more than 10%. Mr. President, this funding is like a funding gap, and we are born within the same government. And wherever there is a shortfall, our last resort to the Central Bank of Nigeria, we should be able to guide what the interest rate should be. And according to Senator Adam Oshiomhole, this particular borrowing is for infrastructure, nothing more.
it can be for recurrent expenditure. And I want to draw a caution that our Committee on Banking and Other Financial Institutions must be read alert, because it is expected that this borrowing, once this money is borrowed, with the improved revenue that we currently have, as we speak, the revenue generated to date is over 9 trillion naira. We must be ready to pay this money regularly. Minimum, in between borrowing should not be more than 3 months, so that we don't have this money accumulated, that at the end of the day we start running out of scatter. That is the duty of the Committee on Banking and Other Financial Institutions, to monitor from time to time how much was borrowed, what it was used for, and what is the resultant effect on the GDP of our country. So I want to agree with this bill, and I'm supporting it in its entirety, but to draw that note of caution that we must monitor that it is only for infrastructure and infrastructure alone. I so submit, Mr. President.
I think this is to the issue that if we are borrowing, we should not borrow just for recurrent expenses. We shouldn't borrow to go and put in something in consumption. That we should borrow to put something down for legacy projects for the future, so that our children can inherit something. Otherwise, it will have no meaning. And you also said that what is here is 15%, and that you would like it to be reduced to 10%. Am I right? And everybody seems to agree. But I don't think there's anybody that is opposed to this bill. Will the Senate now allow this bill to be read a second time? Those in support say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. So proceed. Clerk of the Senate. Please. A bill for an act to amend the Central Bank of Nigeria's Act Cap C4, Laws of the Federation of Nigeria 2004, to increase the total advances of the Central Bank of Nigeria to the federal government from 5%, well, here we say to a maximum of 15%, and for other matters connected thereto, 2024. Second reading taken. Distinguished colleagues, this bill is referred to the Committee of the Whole in line with Senate Rule 84 for further consideration. Please, a bill for an act to amend the Central Bank of Nigeria's Act Cap C4, Laws of the Federation of Nigeria 2004, to increase the total advances of the Central Bank of Nigeria to the federal government from 5%, well, here we say to a maximum of 15%, and for other matters connected thereto, 2024. Second reading taken. Distinguished colleagues, this bill is referred to the Committee of the Whole in line with Senate Rule 84 for further consideration.
Additional clause. This borrowing should be.
Additional clause is what gave the former regime. Go on.
Additional clause is that this borrowing should be for capital expenditure only. That is the addition.
He is a very experienced legislator. The fact is that we want to get this impasse today, and the House has finished, and they're even gone. They've done the votes and proceedings. Anything we do here outside what they've done will, in fact, we have to come back again. So please, I appeal that we should allow it to be the way it is, so that we go in line with what the House has done. I so appeal.
You know, if you saw, we have talked to them.
Yeah, they're finished. We are working on the same page, and they're finished. that this is better because there could be security issues. You know, we could, God forbid, there could be attacks, there could be a threat to our sovereignty, and there could be the need to mobilize funds to deal with that immediately, which would be recurrent in nature. So we should not kind of tighten the space for the government. We're a nation, a very big nation, the most, the biggest, black country in the world, the largest in Africa. So we should allow the government to have that latitude. So let's not tighten the whole thing. But the only thing is to strengthen our oversight. Strengthen our oversight as explained by the President and also the Chairman Banking Committee. So let's allow it to remain, and then we'll move on so that we go in the same wavelength with the House of Representatives. Thank you, Mr. President.
The Senate in the Committee of the Whole considered the Central Bank of Nigeria's CBN Act Amendment Bill 2024 and approved as follows. Long title as recommended. Number of clauses, clause 1 as recommended. Clause 2 as amended. Interpretation clause nil. Short title clause 3 as recommended. Explanatory memorandum as recommended. Is this a true reflection of what transpired in the Committee of the Whole? Leader of the Senate.
Very well. This thing is not borrowing. It is an advance that the central bank grants to the federal government when it is short of revenue while implementing its program, which is supposed to be retired within the financial year. So there is no new borrowing that you are talking about. It's an advance that is given, short-term advance that is given to the government for implementation of existing projects. So you cannot tie, the only thing that we said about capital projects is that, this facility should just be granted to cover so that capital projects do not stop, because of shortness of revenue. That's all. But the major issue is that it is not any new borrowing. It's an advance that is given to the government to implement an existing budget. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
For third reading. Those in support that the bill be now read a third time say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Clerk of the Senate. Distinguished colleagues, a bill for an act to amend the Central Bank of Nigeria's Act Cap C4, Laws of the Federation of Nigeria 2004, to increase the total advances of the Central Bank of Nigeria to the federal government from 5% to a maximum of 10%, and for other matters connected thereto 2024. Third reading taken. Distinguished colleagues, a bill for an act to amend the Central Bank of Nigeria's Act Cap C4, Laws of the Federation of Nigeria 2004, to increase the total advances of the Central Bank of Nigeria to the federal government of Nigeria from 5% to a maximum of 10%, and for other matters connected thereto 2024. Third reading taken and passed. Leader of the Senate. Let me thank all my colleagues for their contributions and again, patriotic zeal. Yes, it's been very painstaking and time consuming, but I think doing a good thing is worth our while, because we can't rush into a bill of this nature without considering the pros and cons and looking at the implications, including inflation, and of course also the workability of government. Again, this is taken for the purpose of ensuring that government moves smoothly and that we do everything to support the administration to contribute and move the nation forward in all spheres. So this patriotic bill that we have passed today is also another major impetus to urge Nigerians to shun any act of violence and to shun the speculations that government is not doing anything. Government is doing a lot. And we in the parliament are also doing a lot. And we also continue to do a lot for them in order to ensure that we ameliorate the situation, and then in the long term, we end the suffering of Nigerians and bring the country back to a trajectory of prosperity. I hope even this bill on its own, as passed by this National Assembly today, will help to assuage the feelings of those who may not know that government is ready to do anything to assist them. So I thank you for your sacrificial contributions and your patriotic disposition. Thank you. Leader of the Senate.